Professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering, would like to welcome you all in 1 week FDP program titled Recent Trends in Computation, Data Processing and Security, organized by Computer Science Department. Today is fourth day of FDP, and we are going to have a session on the topic Risk Assessment and Management in Cybersecurity. This topic is delivered by Dr. Saurabh Dikshit. Now I'm going to introduce Dr. Saurabh Dikshit. Sir has obtained his Bachelor of Engineering degree from Birla Institute of Technology, Mesra, Ranchi, in the field of Electronics and Communication, and obtained his MBA degree from Rajashree Tandon Open University, Allahabad. He has completed his PhD from Babu Banarsi Das University, Lucknow, in the field of Electronics and Communication Engineering, a specialization in wireless communication. Sir has earned the title of IEEE Certified Wireless Communication Professional with extensive knowledge of various concepts of wireless communications, which includes state-of-the-art technologies in 5G communications and machine learning. He has 20 years of experience in academics, research, and industry. Sir has also published around 100 papers in journals and conferences of national and international level. He has also reviewed and contributed as technical program committee member in more than 50 international conferences and journals. Now he is currently working as a cloud security engineer with leading multinational company in Pune, India. Also, he has extensive knowledge of security protocols and standards deployed and the common information security management frameworks. He is also proficient in management of security controls and risk management. Sir, on the behalf of the Institute, I welcome you on the session. As we are aware that risk assessment and management is an important part to identify, access, and control threat to all business operations. Therefore, it can be observed that cybersecurity plays important role by protecting all categories of data, theft, and damage. Now, sir is going to enlighten us with today's topic. One thing I would like to add in this session, if anybody have query related to the cybersecurity during the session, they can ask in chat box, and at the end of the session, the questions will be taken by the sir. Sir, please continue, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Vanda ma'am. So, a very warm afternoon to all the participants and especially Dr. Sarika, director, and all the professors and uh, the we have the friends from academics. And if any students are there, like or postgraduate or research scholars, so a warm welcome to them as well. So today, I first of all thank Vandana for giving this introduction. And as you must be aware that I have a blend of academics and research along with some industry experience. So basically, I've been in academics, but for the past 2 years, I kind of made a paradigm shift into the industry and especially into the cybersecurity world. So very often we are like hearing these terms like cybersecurity and cybersecurity breach, which has become a very common term these days. And various organizations are becoming victim of this cybersecurity threat or cybersecurity risk or any cybersecurity incident. And of late, the Indian government and even the global authorities around the globe, around the world, have become very like sensitive to these cyber threats, and they have framed strict regulations and tight laws around these uh, to prevent these cybersecurity threats. And the organizations which are, say, responsible for preserving the data or doing any business, they are governed by these regulatory authorities, and they have to put very strict controls to ensure that there is no breach in any confidentiality or integrity or availability, what we call as the CIA triad that we'll be discussing in detail in the presentation. So we have the topic is recent trends in computation, data processing, and security. So I'll be just giving you a brief introduction what is meant by cybersecurity, what is the relevance of cybersecurity, and then what is meant by risk assessment and management. So these are the two current two topics which uh, we'll be focusing on these two topics: assessment, what is risk, what is the risk assessment, and how to manage it. So that is the topic of my focus. Okay, what is the need for, and why are we hearing these terms like cybersecurity, and why is this greater emphasis on cybersecurity of late? Like this has been we are hearing them for the last say 3 years or 2 years. So what exactly happened? What is the scenario? Why this became such a hot topic of late? So we need to look at the global perspective, and we have been through some turbulent years in the form of the COVID 2019 and its repercussions. So what really happened is we have moved, like especially in the software field, we moved from on-prem, that is on-premise, to the cloud. So this migration to the cloud, what has it done? It has, although given a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, it has also created a kind of a window to cybersecurity threats. So when we have this window to the cybersecurity threats, obviously we need to have tighter controls in place to combat these cybersecurity threats, so that we have more controls, and we are not in a position to give up this cloud, this migration to cloud, and migration to cloud will continue as we are currently in a hybrid mode. Most of the organizations have their resources in cloud, some in the on-prem. So we are currently in a hybrid mode, but in the years to come, probably most of the organizations you'll find will be moving to the cloud services because of these advantages. Like these are the it offers a lot of advantages over the on-prem, on-demand, broad network, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, measured services. So it is offering the organizations like some reduction in resources as well as in the cost. So overall, cloud offers say almost 50% reduction in the operational cost. So definitely, most of the organizations will prefer moving on to the cloud. But it comes at a cost. The cost is we measure in terms of security, because in the cloud we do not know where are the resources, who where. It's not like a some kind of a closed network. It is a kind of we have scattered resources over the cloud. So here this emphasizes over in the slide, it has emphasized there is a trade-off between efficiency and security. So it offers flexibility, then it has efficiency, strategic value, speed and productivity. Obviously, there is a lot of cost savings as well. But then there is a trade-off that the security is diminished when we move to the cloud. So there is a kind of a trade-off between efficiency and security, or flexibility and security. So cloud is something which lets us work from anywhere, anytime, and you can log on. You do not need to have any kind of say physical credentials to really access the services, access the network. Only thing is you need to have the software credentials, that is your uh, maybe some authentication, two-factor authentication may be required to log into the services in the cloud. But you can log in from anywhere, anytime, and so it offers a lot of flexibility. So it has efficiency as well because of this flexibility it follows, and then it has strategic values. You and the speed and productivity is also enhanced, that you do not need to build your application from scratch. You can directly uh, host a service. You can tenant like have hire a service on the cloud. So it offers cost saving. It has a pay as you go model. So whatever services are required, you can hire that service, and then when you have done away, you can like do away with those services as well. So this is a trade-off between efficiency and security, but again we need to have more tighter strict controls. And who is responsible for the security? So many times there is a debate that who owns the security, who owns the assets. So who owns the basically you can say the risk as well. So ultimately it is the management of any organization who owns the risk. It is the management who is responsible for security as well. But to start with, we say that security is holistic. What is meant by holistic in nature? Like security is not a simple job with one of them, like one certain department or certain group of people who are responsible for security. Security is everyone's job, like in any IT organization, right from the client, from the user, from the app owner. Everyone is responsible for ensuring the security of the organization. So we need to act in a responsible manner. And to act in a responsible manner, there should be what we call as security awareness, or security IQ should be there. What is meant by security awareness is that we need to be aware what is required of do. Like suppose there is a phishing mail and it shows that it is external mail, and so we need to be cautious of our action. Like it's a simple rule is pause before you click. Like it's many times we receive, even in our say personal mailbox, you receive a unintended mail and from a anonymous caller or anonymous sender, and we simply without much thought we go and click on the link. So this may be some kind of a phishing mail, some kind of cyber risk or cyber threat which is going through our mails. So email is one of the resources, like still say 80 to 85% of the attacks are initiated through emails. So we need to be like next time whenever we are receiving any unknown mail or so, the general rule is to discard them unless you are sure or of responding to them, like, or obviously we should not click on any external link which promises of secure or free software, because they that may be a link, or that may be some kind of having a false DNS, and it can lead to like your resources can be compromised, or your credentials can be compromised by clicking on that link. So security is something which is more holistic, and we need to create awareness within the organization as well as those who are responsible for using the resources of the organization. For example, a bank. So bank has clients. So we need to ensure have or create that awareness within our users, within the partners in the bank, within the employees of the bank, as well as the clients of the bank. So that is why we say that security is everyone's job. And many times the consequences of the ignorant and the inattention are the same. That means if we have untrained resource, and we are not suppose a resource or an employee just goes and clicks out of ignorance, so maybe that it will have the same consequences or same adverse impact as that of a ill-intentioned someone who's trying to breach the confidentiality. So the consequences will be the same. That is why we say it is this, whether you are ignorant or you have ill intentioned, but the consequences will be the same. So obviously one needs to be well informed, and not only this is true for cyber people who are in the cyber security. Now almost all of us are touched by like cyber and transactions which are over the net, over the internet. So we need to be aware of what are the security controls we need, or security protocols which we need to follow. So some of the security controls are in the form of policies and procedures. Then technological security, application security, operating system security, cloud, physical security. So policies and procedures, and what is the difference between policies and procedures and technical security? So as a technology professional, say suppose you have uh, engineering or IT background, so there will be obviously a kind of a natural bias towards adopting technical controls for implementing security. But equally important, or rather more important, are the policies and procedures. So what is the difference between policies and procedures and technical control is that policies are implemented by the management. So policies are something which form the framework, or which govern the technical controls, like what should be the level of technical control, how much should be, what should be the acceptable level of risk, because today's world we cannot say that we are completely free of risk. There will be risk, there will be cyber threats, but we need to devise ways where we can combat these cyber threats, as well as we need to devise ways how and what should be the level of control we need to implement. So these level of controls, these acceptable level of risk, or what we call as risk appetite, that needs to be decided by the management, and the technology people need to kind of align with those policies and procedures which is framed by the management. So here there has to be a kind of a sync between these policies and the technical controls. Then we have the app security and the operating system security. So Like app security is something when we are developing, like say you have the DevOps. So now we have something, some terms like DevSecOps, that is development and security operations are kind of mingled together. So what is happening is while we are developing the operations or we are developing the applications. So security needs to be embedded within those development apps. Security needs to be embedded when we are creating those development apps. So security starts, or we have something called SSDLC, Secure Software Development Lifecycle. So secure software development lifecycle implies that we need to, right from the software development lifecycle, we need to keep security in mind and we need to implement security controls right at the time of inception. So same goes with the operating system security as well as the cloud security. And then finally, we have physical security, that is physically securing the assets, the computer systems or power backup, and prevent if there is any like sabotage or some kind of physical mishap, or some, like suppose there is a strike or some kind of physical unrest in organization or in any in the premises of the organization. So there should be uh, adequate physical security to secure the assets of the organization. So security will be of various types. It's not only physical security, then cloud security, the operating system app, as well as the well-being of the employees of the organizations or the partners or the clients who are within the premises. So security is a very broad concept basically, and that's why we say that it has to be done or it has to be achieved by creating awareness, and finally it is a holistic and everyone's job. So that was the key concept in this security, like in risk management and uh, assessment. We first of all need to understand what is meant by security and who owns security. So everyone owns security. All the stakeholders are responsible for securing the assets, the data, and whatever is like of value, whatever is of significance to any organization. So at this, I would like to take a pause, and if you have, please you can go ahead with the questions, because next we will be starting with the CIA trap. Any questions, one by man, anyone, or if you have any feedback, whatever, like.
Dear participants, if you have any questions, you can ask.
And there will be a questionnaire also. So I would like to invite the participants to have a more like kind of a more interactive and more participation. That is why the word participation means you need to participate, and it should not be completely passive. So please try to be engaged also. It's not, it should not be like a kind of a classroom like where the teacher is delivering and students are participating, and more frequently there is a passive participation from the students. So it should not be like that. And please do participate. It should be more like an interaction. And I'm here from the industry, and we would definitely like to have more participation and interaction. So anyways, I'll go ahead with the next slide. So what are the security controls? So is anyone aware what is like identify, implement and manage access models, classify data, configure VPN, encrypt data, security bubble, managed access approach, specific roles for access. So these are the terms which we use across the security jargon or the security uh, platform. So what are these exactly meant by these identify, implement and manage access models? So here we are following the principle of least privilege, like when suppose you join the organization, so initially you will be having very least access to the resources or to the various apps. So it is we follow only the least privilege, and as per your role you will be provided the access. So and there is a annual access audit. So every year there is an annual access audit. So it checks whether you have only those access which are required for your role for your job. So any additional access needs to be done away. So what is meant by security or access audit. So we have access audits every around the year. So that checks for any kind of like additional access you might be having. So most of the organizations are having these audits to do away with any additional access. So it's not like we will be having all the access at one go. It's only those access which we require for our rules for our jobs. So that is what is meant by managing access models. Then classify data. Now, of late, you must have heard, like even in yesterday's budget, I was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a mention of having a digital data policy, and which is the framework is already around here, and we'll be very soon having a digital data policy. So what is happening is data is one of the key assets which is governed or which is under the, say, owned by any IT company. So this data can be sensitive or this data can be confidential, this data can be also non-sensitive as well. So we need to classify the data as in the various categories as being highly sensitive, or it is sensitive, or it is non-sensitive, or it can be public, it can be shared in the public domain, or it can be shared within the organization. So accordingly, we need to classify data. So data classification is one of the important security controls where whatever data is being held by an organization, which is uh, within the assets or within the database, that needs to be adequately and correctly classified. So classification of data is an important security control where we need to, and if it is highly sensitive data, then that needs to be encrypted as well. So sensitive data and highly sensitive data needs to be in encrypted format. So we have various tools which can encrypt this data using various protocols. AES is one of them which we use widely, that is Advanced Encryption Standard. It uses a 256 key protocol, as well as we are also like now we are studying about homomorphic encryption, where there is a kind of a mathematical model which decrypts the data once it is encrypted. Then we have what is VPN, which is the virtual private network, and we also have kind of security bubble. Security bubble is like which we can create using the VPN, that is create a bubble around, and whatever information is there, remains in that bubble, remains within that uh, small network. And then we have talked about managed access approach and specific roles for access. So you will be allowed access over the apps according to your roles, according to your job description. Then you can have in the cloud like software as a service. So again, who owns this risk? So once again, it is not only the cloud but also the app owners who own those. So it has to be uh, the entire it has to be jointly shared by the IT teams as well as the cloud app teams or the cloud service provider. So we have for different models, we have different kind of controls like software as a service or platform as a service has different kind of models like SaaS will emphasize more access control and PaaS will have bring greater responsibility because platform as a service will offer more resources for the app owner, for the IT teams, and then they need to own greater responsibility for ensuring security. Whereas in the SaaS, you have limited access over the apps or over the various services. So the bottom line is like the security responsibilities are split between the cloud provider and the IT teams. Okay, now we move on to the important concept, what is meant by this triad. As we can see, this triangle represents three important terms, that is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the whole security, in fact, uh, it revolves, the security principles revolve around these three very important uh, principles, that is confidentiality, integrity, and here on the left it is mentioned what can be the consequences of any breach in confidentiality. Like there can be legal penalties on breach of privacy laws, and there should be due care and due diligence, financial penalties, reputational damage, and obviously these are some kind of breach which no organization will like or which no organization can really afford these days due to high legal penalties, high legal uh, adverse impacts because of these breaches. So as I mentioned earlier, like now we have regulatory authorities around the globe which are kind of imposing these laws and ensuring that the organizations do keep the data or the assets in a secure manner and secure the assets for the clients, and any communication which is going out that needs to be really very secure, that needs to preserve the confidentiality because once there is a breach, there have been a lot of breaches for around like every year we come across breach. So what happens to if there is a breach is that it although has a lot of like there will be huge financial penalties, but apart from those huge financial penalties, there is also a loss of reputation. So this loss of reputation has greater impact because it affects the company's or the organization's performance over a long-term basis, because like they may be able to pay the financial penalties because multinationals may be having a lot of reserve, but then the reputation damage is something which they kind of dread more rather than any financial impact. So this is something which no company would like to take a hit over here as far as reputation damage is concerned. So what is confidentiality? Like what is meant by this term confidentiality? As we discussed, like this is simply like protection of the sensitive assets from improper disclosure. So what can be your assets like intellectual property, any piece of code or ingenious software which you might develop, or even say your research plan. So even in like academic institutions, like we need to have some kind of confidential. But normally, like what happens is you have a file over that you have written, like a physical file you write confidentially. But again, it is being carried through physical means. So obviously, it is not a foolproof method to secure by writing confidentially or something like that. So again, what we do is we kind of apply technology, and wherever there is a sensitive data, so organizations what they do is they keep that data in encrypted format. So even if there is a some kind of breach, or even someone is able to access that uh, data, so they won't be able to really make out a much meaning out of it because it is in encrypted format. Again, the business plans need to be preserved, because suppose you are improper disclosure means if even if you are going traveling in a flight and you happen to be in a discussion over your mobile phone and you are revealing the plans, and someone who's sitting next to you maybe from a rival company, so what happens is you are disclosing the business plans. So again, so all the information is has to be preserved. So you need to preserve the privacy and the secrecy of the organization's assets. Assets can be intellectual property, it can be data, it can be like any information or business plan. So basically, as in a sense, this whole security is a perception. Like we need to have that kind of view to ensure security. That means rather being having a kind of a paranoid for as far as security is concerned. Paranoid means like you are having some level of suspicion for various transactions, and we need to figure out what are the risks involved in various say transaction or in various uh, process or procedures or in any policies which we are implementing across the organization. Then what are the breaches? Like breach in confidentiality, that can be intentional or it can be accidental. So again, intentional is something where it can involve the insider as well. And many times, more often than not, it is the insider who is involved in breach in security. So what we call as insider threat is a bigger threat than the external threat. So that is why we need to have a paranoid approach as far as security is concerned. So We will discuss. That's why like the management has a view where the segregation, there is a segregation of duty, so that not a single group or a single person will have the complete control over a process. Rather, the process is divided into different chunks, and these chunks have segregated in different departments or different units, and they have to perform their part to complete that process. So when we talk about covert or overt, so it can be hidden or it can be something which is kind of a sabotage or some kind of more revealing. Then it can be accidental. Accidental is again some untrained resource is there, or they are untrained, or they are not technology savvy, so they might ignorantly click on a link or open a mail or open that a particular website. So or they can be, many of the attacks are through social engineering, so like through like social accounts like Facebook or LinkedIn, you can reveal some of the information which is not supposed to be. Then if you're using the organization's assets for personal use, then also some information can be transferred or that can be compromised. So these are the various accidental, that is due to some ignorant action, some breach can be manifested. So even if it's accidental or intentional, but again, the consequences are of the breach will be almost the same. And also we need to figure on the timing and storage, like what is the timing. Suppose it is that attack is timed in such a manner that it occurs on a weekend, or whether it occurs on a fresh Monday morning. So that is something. So accordingly, their impact will vary according to the timing of that event. How to ensure confidentiality? So like we have various methods like encryption, masking. Encryption, masking, obfuscation, and tokenization. So what is the difference between them? Encryption, we are aware, like we kind of use the encryption keys to encrypt data using a encryption algorithm. Masking is something when we kind of hide the data or hide some of the characters to mask. Obfuscation is something like we kind of complicate the things so that we any like eavesdropper or unintentional uh, say security threat is not able to make out much sense out of the information. And tokenization is something different, where we are not really sharing the exact information with a third party. So like example, you go to a petrol pump for getting your vehicle filled, like for with petrol. So what happens is like we go and share our credit card or provide the credit card to the petrol pump employee to make the transaction. So you are giving the physical uh, control or physical asset to a third party over here. But in tokenization, that is not required. What can be done is this card can be shared with the exact with the say vendor, or like you can go and share it with the vendor machine, and this whole system will interact with the bank which has issued that card, and the bank will instead give provide a token to the third party, that is the petrol pump or from where you are filling the gas. So that will be form of a token that the transaction has been successful, and they will receive a token instead of you sharing your credit card credentials with the third party. So you are not sharing, you are sharing it directly with the bank, and the bank will share a token with the third party. So in a sense, we are securing the assets or the credit card, which is quite often it happens that cards and all they get compromised. So that is what is meant by tokenization. Then obviously we have these controls like the policy, which is key to security, as I mentioned. This is again governed by the management. They need to decide what should be the level of control, what is the risk appetite. Then access controls are again how much access should be given to a different level of employee, what can be their access levels, how much you need to know, and finally there's a principle of least privileges, like we get the access only when it is required. So least privilege means only that access will be given to an employee which is required. No additional access will be given to them. The next in the triad we saw what is integrity. So what is integrity is like ensuring the accuracy, precision, and trustworthiness. So integrity of information, that is, for example, you are sending an email. So when we are sending an email, so how do you know that you have received an email? How do you know that it is from the intended user? How do you ensure that it is from the intended user and not someone has spoofed that email? So integrity is something which prevents some process called spoofing. Spoofing is when someone is trying to uh, kind of mask their identity and trying to portray themselves as someone else. Like suppose you receive a email stating that it's from Bill Gates. So that email may have the same email which is being used by Bill Gates. So how do you ensure that it is from the intended user? So it's like this is what is meant by spoofing. So we have something called digital signature. So digital signature is based on technologies like S-MIME and all, and then this digital signature will ensure that it is from the intended user. So digital signature is just like you have use a passport. So to gain entry to a country, you need a passport. So passport is given by uh, normally it's the government authorities, and it is a credential source of identity. Similarly, so you have a digital signature which is given by credential authority. So it is a certificate authority which gives you this digital signature, and it has its own credential. So once you are certified that it is having a digital signature and it is authentic. So just to ensure the integrity. So accuracy, precision, trustworthiness, for these we have something called we use the hash key or some algorithms to ensure the accuracy, the precision, and it is trustworthy. Finally, to ensure its integrity, we need to check the files, the logs, the reliability, the usefulness. So you can check into the files, the logs, and the reliability. So logs are something which keep recording what is really happening or what is the technology. Suppose you are sharing some information, so logs will keep recording which technology or what is the use case which are behind them. Then input validation and audits are something which is done on a regular basis to check the or to ensure the integrity of the process or the information or the data. Finally, we come to the third principle of the triad, that is availability. Availability simply indicates that whenever a resource is required, whenever it has to be used, it is available for use. So resource can be of different types. It can be, say, data, it can be network, system, it can be process, it can be people. So, and if this availability is compromised, then we are not able to use the resource. For example, if there is a power breakdown, so the we our network will be snapped. So again, so this is something where we our availability will be the availability will be compromised. So there are various ways through which availability can be compromised or can be breached. Like we have, say, denial of service or distributed denial of service, malware or ransomware attacks or sabotage. So these are the various kind of attacks which might compromise the availability of systems. So these are like all the security triad are equally important, but the relative importance depends on the operational environment of the organization. Like you cannot say that which one is more important. It will depend on the operational environment of the organization. So that ends our important triage, like the security principles of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So again, I would like to take a pause and give the floor to our moderator, like Vanda ma'am. So I would like to invite some questions, some because again, I think I've been almost I have spent 1 hour, and so let's have a more some discussion, some questions. So I'll take a pause over here.
Any queries from the participant side?
Okay, Sarika ma'am is the audience. Have you asked them to be quiet? Like I don't know. It is they are unusually very quiet.
What a great presentation, sir. I was trying to be here, but there were so many calls and other. Still, I was able to.
Saurav sir?
Yes.
Sir, one question from my side.
Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
as you are in industries, we have BTech students right now, but MTech students as well as research scholars as well as faculties are attending this FDP. So all of us uh, want to know that what kind of or what are the domains of topics on which our BTech student must do their projects or our MTech scholars should proceed uh, for their dissertation as well as research scholars for their PhD work in the area which you have covered today.
Okay, that's a very inquisitive, like that's a very probing question, I would say. And the answer to this question is lies. It's a very like kind of a vast domain. So you need to really figure out like what should be your kind of what is your area of interest, what is your domain. But I would say yes. In if you can say like we have different say one is like your soft in the IT sector you have software development, you have DevOps, you have cybersecurity. So like there are various domains. Now you need to choose what is the domain of choice because in research you need to be more specific. And then in if suppose I'm talking about cybersecurity, so cybersecurity is one of the most important domain in cybersecurity will be encryption. So as I just mentioned, like there is a lot of research which is going on around encryption. What is the say what is the size like because there will be obviously a trade-off between the encryption standards and the overhead they cause because if you are using say 256 or say 512 bits of encryption, so they will have the overhead, so there will be a trade-off. So and then I also mentioned about homomorphic encryption where decryption is not required, so you use some complex mathematical operations for decryption. So again, what is that which will really make encryption more effective. At the same time, it does not compromise the or too much has too much of an overhead time because it should not compromise the performance as well. Like your system becomes very slow or there is a kind of lag. So again, so these are the topics where you need to kind of focus on encryption can be one. Then similarly, there is a lot of work on these standards and protocols. So what are the protocols which will be and the security protocols, the what is the policy, and then I'll move to risk mitigation. So what is meant by risk controls and risk mitigation? What is meant by risk management? So again, one needs to find out what is their area or what is the domain and accordingly choose mm, kind of because research is something which is more specific. One needs to zero down on your research, so keep on narrowing down your beam of focus and then you will arrive at one specific say topic on one specific domain on which you can really converge.
One more thing, sir. One question from my end.
Sure.
So, I want to one more thing. We Saurabh sir and me, we worked together 20 years back. So Sark is a very renowned academician as well. He has got very impressive research credentials, and uh, spending so much of time in academics, he moved to industry. It's a wonderful move, sir. I must appreciate. And one thing, you know the syllabus of AKTU. Cybersecurity is being taught to the students of second year, and it's a purely theoretical subject. As a theoretical subject, they don't have any kind of experimental learning kind of thing. So how what additional learning we can give to our students, so accordingly our faculty members can be trained, and we will I want in another way, I want to train my faculty members and faculty members of whoever have joined this session as well. So we may conduct some kind of hands-on session on security, so that students can have some additional learning. It's not something which is so theoretical. They need to have practical learning as well. So what kind of course or add-on they can have?
Yeah, thanks, ma'am. Like it was a pleasure for me as well working alongside. So, and thanks for
And
the kind
it's
words.
wonderful that for 20 years we are continuously in touch. So
Yeah,
it's
it
really
has been.
great.
Yeah, it has been an absolute pleasure. So, like if we go back at the syllabus, that's very true that most of our syllabus is focusing on or is more academic in nature. What is meant by academic in nature is that it doesn't have much of a pragmatic, say, sense, or it doesn't have a pragmatic uh, that flavor. So we need to have more of a pragmatic flavor so that the students are kind of more industry ready. Because generally, what happens is when we induct a fresh graduate or a fresh resource, so at least a couple of months or three or even more, depending on the receptivity of the resource. So it's spent in training that resource. And sometimes what happens after, say, you that resource get trained, so they may migrate to a different organization. So that organization feels cheated that they spend so much of time and resource in training a resource and then they
Yeah.
switch. So that is
So
why we
definitely
need
a
to hire.
big problem for the industry. So much of opportunities are there in IT sector, and training itself is it involves a cost as well as time. And once the person is trained, whomsoever is trained enough, he will move to other place. So we have got a good placement in the college, but ultimately the student should have they should be employable, they should have the right kind of skills so that they can easily be absorbed by the IT giants. So do you think so any kind of learning of such kind will help them?
Yes, basically, when any probable hire comes to like is looking for talent, so what is happening is we are hiring talent, we are hiring attitude, skills will follow.
Okay.
So what is happening? Like we need to have in the
I know you
students
are
that
in recruitments as well. So,
yeah.
what kind of skills you people are looking for?
Yes. So we are first is the attitude. Like we are looking for that attitude, that talent or inherent. What are the inherent skills? Because again, even if you are experienced, when you switch an organization, you will need to go through some knowledge sessions and training sessions because each one has a different environment. So, but what is more important is you should be having that, very important is that learning aptitude that is there, that is a must. And the skills which are required is to obviously be prone to adapt. That is the most uh, adapt, like most required skill or very hard skill. That is be prone to like be ready to adapt. So that is very important because it is the technology, the skills are always updating. They are always changing. So when I say that be prone to adapt, is that one should be even like even from the role of a software executive to the role of senior executive, you need to be in a learning mode. So that is the skill. Apart from that, okay, you should be having those skills are always there, like say Microsoft, Excel or that MS Office, and like nowadays we have presentation like Power BI and all those kind of skills. And then obviously what domain you are working, that will require specific skills or specific training. But you will adapt if you're more adaptive, more flexible, so you will be able to imbibe those learnings or inculcate those learnings in a much uh, timely manner and as well as in a more effective manner.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.
So essentially, the bottom line is we are looking for talent. We are looking for that attitude, for that adaptiveness, for that
So
flexibility.
it's our job to develop, inculcate right
Yes,
kind of attitude.
yes, yes.
That's
And
where
during
we
the
work.
trainings, yes, during the trainings, like in the summer trainings, they can have some kind of uh, have some,
Internships.
yeah, some internships like which can be done in a testing environment. Obviously
Mhm.
you cannot have a live project, but that can be done in a testing environment. So the labs can be built so that we can embed some kind of test bed environment, and so that students can get a kind of a flavor of that live environment in a testing environment, so that it's not having any financial impact. But yes, a test bed environment can be created so that they are more familiar with the industry environment. Okay, so any more questions, or we should go ahead because like we are
I think
around the, yes.
one attendee, Mrs. Kavita Patel, she is
Yes.
about to ask something. Is it so?
Okay, please go ahead. You're most welcome.
I have one question.
Yes.
Steps are used during the cloud information security assessment.
Uh, if I can hear correctly, you have asked what are the steps required in
Yes,
cloud security assessment.
yes, sir.
Yeah, so risk assessment is an important aspect, and we are in fact going to discuss the risk assessment. But risk assessment will depend upon your numerous factors like what are the assets, who owns the risk, what is your risk appetite, how much risk you are ready to accept, because it is not about, as you can see, it's not about risk elimination, it is about risk management. Because to be frank, the fact is that you cannot eliminate risk will be there at every process, every step. It's just like you are going out of your house, and when you step out of the house, so there can be a risk that the weather may go bad, or there is some additional traffic, or so the road is bad, road is getting built. So there are, in just like in our mundane life, there are risk at various levels. So similarly, we have risk at various levels in the network security and the cloud security. So the factors which dictate what are the factors, what is the level of risk, or how are we going to assess the risk, depends on, first and foremost, it is who is owning the risk. So the first and foremost, it comes to the management, because management being the owner of the business. So obviously, if there is any breach, they will have to suffer the financial impact. So it is the management's policy which will decide how we are going to assess the risk, how we are going to manage the risk.
Thank you, sir.
uh, is that we will be definitely taking up more discussing the risk assessment. We have not really covered that, but just as an answer to your question, these are
Yeah,
certain
yeah,
points. Okay. Okay,
yes.
so we should go ahead, because I think we will, if we keep on discussing, we'll run out of time. So hopefully it has been interesting, and I would like to take a feedback. If I can make it more interesting, more interactive, I can make more attempts to do so. So any, if you're finding it interesting, just you can in the chat you can press yes or Y or something like that. So it'll be a motivation for me to go ahead. Okay. So we come to risk management and assessment. That was the topic, and the first foremost that is about risk management is not about risk elimination. So we cannot really eliminate risk. Risk will be there, and how much risk we are able to accept, how much risk we are able to mitigate. That will be a key factor which will decide how we are managing the risk. What is risk? It is risk is a probability, like often adverse events. Just like in our mundane life, risk is the probability of a adverse event. Obviously, the factors will be like the probability will differ. For example, probability of an adverse, say, medical event will be more in a person who has having a higher age or greater age as compared to a person who is having who's younger in comparison. So there will be factors which will decide this probability, and obviously, what are the assets? What is the how significant are your assets? That is also important. So what is important is that we need to identify and treat those risks, and obviously keep on uh, prompt monitoring as well. So here we come to risk treatment. It has three pillars, you can say: structured, thorough, timely. So it is a process, should be like for treatment, we should have a structured process which is well defined, well thought of. It's not that you have we go ahead and without a process. So process should be well defined. It should be tailored according to the needs of the organization, according to the scope of the organization. So that is what is meant by structured. Thorough means it should attend to meticulously to the details, like it should be pertinent to the details, like all the factors should be taken into account, should be preconceived, in fact, or and a complete picture should be presented when the documents. So when we say about risk treatment, that means documents should be ready to how to combat any risk. And in the event, unlikely event of any, say, adverse event or some kind of a breach, there should be a process that we are able to have a timely recovery. What is meant by, like, we have a term known as RTO, that is recovery time objective. So RTO will vary according to the asset, according to the application, according to the services which are getting affected. Suppose they are very critical service, so the RTO time will be, say, merely within 1 hour or 2 hours that you have to recover those services. Otherwise, the whole system is getting impacted. If it is some kind of peripheral services, so the RTO, the recovery time objective will be, say, 12 hours or 24 hours. Within that, you have to recover those services. If it is something which is not of much significance, it can extend up to 48 hours or 72 hours, depending on that. So this recovery should be such that there is minimal impact on the business continuity. So this is the three pillars of risk treatment: structured, thorough, timely. Then we come to an important aspect, as it was asked by Ms. Kavita before, like how do you assess? So like assessment of risk, or we call this as quantification of risk, like we can have some kind of a scale from 1 to 10, and normally, say, for example, some scaling is done by various organizations, and any app or any website which has a rating of 10 is considered to be at the least risk, and any app or application or uh, any website which has a risk score of, say, 1 is considered to be at the highest risk. So we can have a kind of a, that is risk quantification. We can have a scaling, and This scaling will depend on various factors, how we scale from 1 to 10. We'll see what are the factors. One of them will be like what are the laws which go around for securing the assets, what is the risk appetite, that is how much is acceptable, how much risk is acceptable for an organization. Then what are the market forces which are governing at that particular time? For example, if you were in a COVID lockdown, there will be different market forces. If not, so accordingly it will vary. So here we have this kind of a cycle where we start with the context. What is the risk context? And then we assess and treat and monitor. So this is how we start, starting with the context, then assessment of the risk, then treatment of the risk, and monitoring. So what is assessment is kind of we are uh, trying to quantify the risk because risk is something more of qualitative in nature, like something which is kind of a probability. So we need to have that quantify that probability. So that is what is meant by assessment of risk. Once the risk is assessed, according to its risk, the risk score, we can have the appropriate treatment of that risk. So it is essential that we have the correct risk score or risk quantification so that accordingly appropriate treatment can be administered. So similarly, we once the treatment is done, and we constantly need to monitor those risks. Any questions on this slide? Okay, there's some background noise.
Sir, I have one question.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Sir, what are the major parameters we need to consider while selecting the controls to the identified risk? Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. So the major parameters will be like we will come to that. Level of risk will be like what is the first and foremost what is the kind of system? Suppose it has some kind of it's a financial impact or you are dealing with a financial institution. So that will be again that will be classified as high risk. So or there has been some new or recently changed systems. Suppose you have implemented some change. So that will be obviously at a higher risk. And what is areas then again the management of the organization also plays an important role in this assessment of risk because when you do a kind of risk audit, so you have to keep in mind what is the risk appetite of the management. So it depends sometimes like it depends on the management. Some managers may be more willing to take the risk rather than others. Some may be more paranoid than others and they want to have it more secure. So they will have more security controls. They will be less acceptable to risk as compared to the ones who are more willing to take the risk. So accordingly, this risk audit needs to keep in mind or needs to align with the management's risk appetite. So the factors which we need to assess is what kind of system, what is the your assets which you are trying to secure, what is the financial impact of that asset. So this financial impact will be calculated by the cost and the it will depend on factors like the cost of the asset, how much, say, what will be the financial impact if there is a breach. So we kind of quantify those factors and then If there has been any kind of a change, that will be also classified as high level of risk. So, and then the domains or the areas which are, say, considered as high risk areas, again, that has to be aligned with the management's principles, the management's guidance. So as security and the technology as professionals, we need to kind of align with the, the organization's management, because ultimately they own the risk, and the owner of the risk has a higher responsibility in the sense that uh, they will be kind of answerable to the regulatory authorities, or they need to, in case of a breach, they have to suffer that reputational damage or that financial impact as well. One of the leading organizations had this impact, and apart from, like, they were since it was a very big organization, they were able to easily like come back from the financial impact, like on whatever the penalty was imposed, but the reputational damage was much had more wider implications than the financial impact. So again, that is why we need to align with the management. So when submitting your audit, like suppose you are doing a risk assessment, so as a technology personnel, when you are submitting the audit, you need to identify that these are the areas which are kind of vulnerable, and to find out those areas, we also use a new concept which is known as penetration testing or vulnerability testing. And this is something which earlier was kind of taboo, and they were known as black hat hackers. So what those black hat hackers used to do is try to intrude to a system to find their vulnerabilities, and also exploit those kind of any intrusion points. So nowadays these companies are hiring them to assess their risk, assess how uh, strong are the firewalls, which, or how strong is the intrusion detection system, uh, to check their vulnerabilities. And like organizations are hiring the penetration testing. So this is one area which has last few years, which has gained a lot of importance, and they have a lot of job opportunities in the field of penetration testing. So earlier they were known as hackers. Now, like black hat hackers, you have white hat hackers. So now, like, since with this term hacker there is some negative connotation, so now these are known as pen testers or penetration testing, which is simply to identify any kind of security breach which may be available, which may be present, or any kind of vulnerability which might be present. So these pen testing employees enter into contract with the organization and do these vulnerability tests and pen testing to check for any uh, points of intrusion where they can intrude, what can they exploit. So, so these are the factors, like, oh, you need to, for risk assessment, you need to check what are the areas which can be intruded. So while submitting this audit, while submitting that report, so these areas need to be earmarked, and you need to submit to the management that these are the areas which require strict, more, say, tighter security controls, because we have identified these the gray areas over here. So again, and also you have to keep what is the level of risk you want to accept, and what will be the impact. So this is the point, like just now I was discussing how we identify, like we do some kind of threat modeling, assessment, risk assessment report, vulnerability, and penetration testing. So while submitting that risk assessment report, you can do some vulnerability and penetration testing. So it's a process like identification of risk will involve uh, a whole process, a couple of teams to do this, and it's is a comprehensive process. Risk assessment report will comprise of any vulnerability and penetration testing report which you might have done, as well as threat modeling. So, so there are two essential features: threats and vulnerabilities. Threats are in fact concerned with what are your kind of enemies. Like we in security, we consider threats as the enemy, and vulnerabilities are what we are. Like suppose we assess ourselves, we reflect on ourselves like, okay, this is my area where I need to improve. Similarly, in vulnerability checks, okay, this is the security control which I need to strengthen, or this is the gray area where I need to really work upon. So that is what is meant by vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are related to what we are, and threats are related to what intruder wants to do. So threats are something related to the intruder, and vulnerabilities are what we are. Okay, any questions on this? Okay, all those, there is a surprise for the participants because after a couple flights, when I complete my presentation, there will be a questionnaire, a quiz, and whoever answers the maximum number of questions correctly will be felicitated by Sarika ma'am. Okay. So there is some incentive for you. So risk analysis, like essentially risk is something as we defined it as a probability that an event, adverse event will cause an impact. So that is a risk. And we can have quantified by measuring the financial impact. We can also, there is a qualitative aspect that uh, not only a level of risk for each stakeholder related to risk event. For example, there is a your breakdown in your vehicle in the car, which you use for going to office or attending to other calls. So obviously there will be financial impact in getting that car restored, getting that vehicle restored, but also there will be qualitative impact in the sense that your maybe your attendance in the office might be affected, or your timings you might get late, or you may not be able to get the attend to the daily course and all. So it can have a qualitative impact as well. So what is the midway out is to have a semi-quantitative risk assessment, that is which combines the quantitative as well as the qualitative side aspect. Okay, this is the table which we use for kind of risk assessment, which is according to the NIST standard, National Institute of Security Technologies. This is a US organization which kind of lays down the security standards. So we have on the left is the likelihood and the level of impact. So if the likelihood is also high and the level of impact is also very high, so obviously that particular asset will be, or that particular risk will be have identified as the key risk, or we need to in fact kind of go in a preventive mode, that we need to really prevent that. As far as if it is very low and the likelihood is low, as well as the impact is also low, then we can kind of accept that level of risk. So here we can say what is how much we can accept from this. We once we uh, jot down these risks over here on the complete this table, so we can have a more comprehensive, say, kind of understanding where we stand, where are the assets, what are the services, and which service we need to really secure so that there is no impact or business impact. Because ultimately, what is the role of security? It is to uh, enable smooth business. It is for uh, continuity of business. So security should be around so that business can be done smoothly and in a secure manner. So that's the whole objective of security. So we need to assess, and wherever we see that the impact is high, so we need to have more tighter security controls along that service or along that app, whatever is having higher impact. Any questions? Okay, this is the further like just now like this also answers the question which was asked few moments ago about what are the risk factors. So like in assessing, like as I said, we need to kind of quantify the risk by having a risk score. So risk score will depend on various factors. More the factors, like more appropriate or more accurate can be the risk score. So, but there are certain features which have more significant than others as far as the quantification of risk is concerned. So we have the threat event, the threat sources, the capability, what is the intent, targeting, relevance, impact, and then the risk. So according to the size of the organization, the impact will differ. Relevance will be what is the domain of the organization, targeting, whether it is targeted towards the organization or the someone else is the victim, and intent is to sabotage or what is so there is a malafide intention. Capability means what is the capability of that threat, whether it is it can be benign as well. So again, that will depend on what is the capability of the threat. So essentially, like the bottom line says that the risk assessment provides essential information required to determine the appropriate risk response. So the risk response will be dictated by our risk assessment. So if we have for any app or any application or any service which has higher risk score or higher risk quantification. So obviously we will need to have a more adequate risk response or a more prompt risk response wherever the risk quantification is high. So finally we come to the risk response. Like we have, say, some threat actor who's trying to exploit the vulnerability, and the vulnerability can have an impact on this on the assets. So this is a event where some intruders trying to exploit the vulnerabilities or the weakness or some openings. So this is can have an impact. So this can be like in the form of a, say, ransomware attack or malware attack, so DOS attack. So various attacks can be there. So we need to how to combat them is by having the security controls. So control selection can reduce the impact as well as the likelihood. So we need to kind of focus on the likelihood of that exploit when there is a significant impact, or it can also we can also try to reduce the impact in case the event there is a vulnerability which has been exploited. So the controls can be implemented at these two stages, where someone's trying to intrude and where to also kind of reduce or nullify or kind of have minimize the impact. So it can risk response has that is why we call this as risk avoidance. Risk avoidance is like you do not venture out, so that is risk avoidance. Risk mitigation is the controls. Risk transference is you're transferring the risk to some third party owner. So that is risk transference, and risk acceptance is when the impact is low. So we kind of accept that level of risk. So any questions? Okay, so this is probably the last slide before we start with the questionnaire. So this is the risk response controls that can be, these are the types, like it can be directive, it can be deterrent, it can be preventive, it can be detective, corrective, it can be recovery. So like for example, it can come from the management, from the technical uh, controls, from physical controls. So it can be in the form of a policy. Say technical is something, a warning banner like do not click on that link or something like that. Physical is like trespassing not allowed or do not enter. Similarly, deterrent is from the management can say that this and this action can invite disciplinary action. Suppose you have a policy and that policy, if anyone violates that policy, so it can invite this disciplinary action. So that will be a deterrent, or to deter, it can be some notification from the technology side or from the physical. Again, there can be a notice attack that trespassing is not allowed. Preventing is segregation of duty. Segregation of duty is again by from the management. That is, as I mentioned, that the entire process should not go to a single team or a single unit. It can be divided into different units so that one unit or one department does not have the full control over a process. Similarly, there can be passwords to prevent, and on the physical side, it can be a boundary, it can be a fence. Detection will be management side, it will be audit the process, and from technical we check the logs and the intrusion detection system. Physical is like smoke detector. Corrective means employee suspension. On the technical side, you need to isolate the system if there is any security breach. There, if there is a fire, you need a fire extinguisher. Finally, recovery is awareness session. Then rebuild, for there should be a backup for the database. Suppose you have a database at a data center, so data centers normally have a backup if you're sending it to the cloud. So you need to have a backup for that database or that app. On the physical side, you need to rebuild. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation, which was about risk management and risk assessment and management. So essentially, we discussed about on the last few slides what is meant by risk, what is the how we define risk, how we quantify risk. Quantification of risk means having a risk score depending on certain factors. And also we can do some vulnerability and penetration testing to kind of submit a report. So you need to submit a risk report. So that is like identifying the risk. And once the risk report is ready, so we can have adequate controls to manage this risk. And if there is an event which has occurred, suppose there is a security breach, then you need to have adequate backup for combating or like minimizing the adverse impact of that event. So this is what is meant by having those control sections or security controls. If there is already someone has tried to exploit the vulnerability, so we can try to reduce the impact. Reducing the impact, like for example, there is a server which is compromised. So what you need to do is isolate that server from the rest of the on-prem sources or the cloud sources so that uh, infection, that virus is not able to spread across the domain, across the organization. Okay, so I once again take a pause and invite questions from a very active audience.
Any queries from the participant side?
Okay, so this is about risk management control. In case you have any questions, you can obviously, I've already shared my personal email ID. You can uh, share your queries, your doubts, or any questions related to just like what are the probable areas of research or what are the probable areas you need to really work on to build a career in IT, or what are the hot areas which are in demand in IT sector. So we have, or you can contact through Sarika ma'am or Vandana ma'am, like through any of your senior management. Or so next we will move on to one of the activity which I decided to have yesterday, because yesterday I was attending the lecture of Professor Singh from IIT. So it was good, and I thought that we can have kind of add some more participation from the audience, like can have some questions. So let's see what is how much effectively has this presentation has been. So let's have a quick feedback in the form of these questions. So this is the first review question, and it is a multiple choice. One answer is correct. So which of the following actions will reduce risk to a laptop before traveling to high risk area? You have four options. You can choose any one of them. So I'll give you exactly say 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, you can record your response over the chat. or you can also unmute yourself and speak.
Participants may raise their hand to answer.
So this question basically is deals with the risk to your physical asset. Like it's not on the network side or on the endpoint side. It is where it's risk to your asset, to your laptop. So when we say high risk area, is that maybe your laptop may be prone to some stealing or it can be stolen. So what you need to do, suppose you are traveling to a high risk area which is prone to such activity, what do you need to do before you go to that particular area? So what we can do is do some elimination and then come to the right answer.
Sir, we have one participant, Kavita ma'am is there, who wants to answer.
Yeah, please go
So I think the C option, because it's a high risk area, as you mentioned already. So if it's a high risk, so if we re-image our hard disk drive, so we can recover the data. If we lost our laptop, we can recover the data from hard disk. If we purge or re-image our hard disk drive. So I think so the C will be the correct answer.
Okay, so let's see, like for example, examine the device for physical tampering. Obviously, you won't do it before you have traveling. So implement more stringent baseline configurations. So this is again uh, something, this can
By
be one of,
eliminating
yes.
the
Yeah, so like here, what is happening is there can be more than one correct answer, but again, we need to choose what is the best option. So according to me, I think D is the better option amongst the two, C and D, change access codes, because normally, practically speaking, we are not going to really do so much of work before, like say, reimaging the hard disk drive, because it requires much more effort than changing the access codes. So if we change the access codes, like for example, if even if your laptop gets compromised or stolen, so the person who is having the physical possession may not be able to really use that laptop. So one of the better options, C is also correct, but we in this case, the better option will be to change the access codes.
answer. So, but if
Yes.
we choose D, the answer. So in that case, that person will not access because we changed the access code. But at the same time, we probably lost our data. So that's why I thought C will be the answer.
Loss of data when you are changing the access codes.
Said that change the access code. So if the
Yes.
laptop stolen, nobody can access that data.
Yes, like when there is a change in the access codes, so that's what they like. Normally, what happens is your there should be a backup. Basically, there should be a backup. So you need to have whatever your files are there, your folders are there. That should be over some kind of a shared drive, or they should be having a backup. So even if your laptop gets compromised, stolen, or some kind of it gets corrupted. So you should be having a backup, and changing the access codes will ensure that we are ensuring its integrity.
Fine, sir.
So anyways, yeah, your answer is also correct. But we are looking for the best answer. So, anyways, you get 1 point for having this answer. It is very close. So 1 point to Kavita. Next. Which of the following represents the greatest risk to data confidentiality?
Yes, ma'am. Kavita ma'am.
Yes, Kavita.
Yes, sir. Again, the answer is more preferably C.
Yeah, this time you are spot on. And yes, when we talk about confidentiality, so as if you refer to the slides, we have uh, mentioned that in confidentiality, what is the means to ensure confidentiality? It is encryption is one of the key uh, methods or methodology to ensure this confidentiality. So like for your backups need to be encrypted. If they are not encrypted, so they pose a risk to this confidentiality. So again, uh, Kavita ma'am has now 2 points. Okay. So,
Thank you, sir.
okay, thank you. Okay, now we move on to the third question. The company whose IT services are being delivered from a tier 4 data centers preparing a company-wide business continuity plan. Which of the following failures should the IT manager be concerned with? Okay, this question, to give you a hint, this is related to the one of the triad, that is availability. So what can compromise the availability amongst these four options?
Yes, Preeti ma'am has raised her hand. Yes, ma'am. Proceed with the answer.
Uh, I think the correct answer is D, network.
Yes, availability will be compromised by network as well as power. So amongst these C and D, which is the more appropriate?
B. So, B. Maybe B. B. More appropriate is C.
Yes. So This is, I would agree, this is C, which is power. So because yeah, without power, so like network and application will be of no use. So here, what is getting compromised is the availability. So security has three triads: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So availability is getting compromised, and when we do not have power. So who answered this?
Sir, I have answered D, and means I have doubt in between C and D that time. But
Okay,
according to you, C is the
I think
correct answer.
yeah, I think you can get the point for this. So now you are 1 point behind. Let's see. We have a couple of questions left. What is the most important consideration from a data security perspective when an organization plans to relocate?
Yes, Amrita Mohan, ma'am has raised her hand. Ma'am, please proceed with
Sir,
the answer.
sir, the C option. Conduct a gap analysis of a new facilities against existing security requirements.
Yeah, basically here again, there is a kind of discrepancy between C and D. So conduct a gap analysis of new facilities against existing security requirements and revise the disaster recovery and business continuity plan. So I think C is also correct, and we can go with C. That is correct. Conduct a gap analysis, new facilities against existing security requirements. Finally, we have what is the most proactive way to mitigate the risk of an attacker gaining network access and using a protocol analyzer to capture and view unencrypted traffic.
Yes, Monica Nagar, ma'am, you have raised the hand.
Uh,
Kindly proceed with the answer.
Ma'am, according to it, might be D. Install the anti-spyware would be the minimum effort that might be done by the person.
Yes, this is D, but here, if there is an attacker who is getting some network access, so what is happening is uh, you need to kind of isolate, like we discussed, one is isolation of the network from the compromised server or the compromised system. So here we can have C because we are have to isolate, do some kind of medium access control filtering on the enterprise. So what we are trying to do is, if there is an attacker which who's trying to compromise the entire enterprise, so what we need to do is isolate the affected or the compromised services or the compromised resource from the entire enterprise. So we need to kind of filter to prevent an unauthorized device from connecting to the network. So this is something where we will have C, because anti-spyware software will be more as a intrusion detection, but for isolation we need to do some MAC filtering. So here the correct answer is C. Okay, the next question is regarding once again confidentiality can be breached via social engineering attacks. Though training is helpful in reducing the number of these attacks, it does not eliminate the risk. Which of the following choices would be an administrative policy that is most likely to help mitigate this risk? Just remember, this is administrative policy, that is from the management.
Yes, Monica ma'am, you have again raised the hand. Please proceed with the answer.
Okay, ma'am, if we talk about, according to me, it's might be possible job rotation will be most suitable administrative policy.
Okay, job rotation is something like suppose I'm doing a job in some excess management and suddenly my job is rotating. So what happens is like you need to switch to a new domain. So that will be again requiring some additional access. So the transition takes time. So for a process, what happens is that process is divided into chunks, and that process is divided into different, say sub process, and each sub process will be assigned to a different unit, so that the complete process is being done by different units. So that is what we call as segregation of duties. So the correct answer will be D, segregation of duties. Because job rotation, again, like it's something you cannot have it every 6 months or 1 year, because once you are establishing domain, so you would like to work in that domain. But you can segregate the duties, segregate the controls, so that uh, one single unit or some employees do not have a complete control over the process. Finally, this is the last question. What is the regarding the impact, like of integrity breach, impact of the data, overall categorization of the system? Suppose potential impact is high. So what is the overall categorization of the system? So again, you can refer to that table where we had the impact and likelihood. So when the impact is high, what will be the categorization of the system?
Yes, Kavita ma'am, you can proceed with the answer.
A system minimum security baseline references might be the answer is D, minimum to high.
Yes, I think
Medium
it's
to high,
correct.
sorry.
Yeah, it is. It will be high or medium high. So we can say like it is high, because when the impact is high, so obviously calculation has to be high or medium. So again, I would say it's correct. So right. So we are done away with the questionnaire and with the presentation. Um, Now we can have who is the winner of this quiz. Is it Kavita ma'am? Some answers were given by Monica ma'am. So I leave this decision to our management, like Sarika ma'am and Bunda ma'am.
Heartiest congratulations, ma'am, Kavita ma'am, and Monica ma'am. Wonderful answers. And I appreciate your answers as well as your effort. And remaining participants, you were also expected to answer, but the people who attempted, they must be appreciated by all of us.
Yeah, all the participants as such are the winners, but those who attempted are slightly more enthusiastic. So, anyways, it has been a very enriching experience sharing my thoughts and with a very enlightened audience, I would say. And once again, thanks to the organizers, Sarika ma'am and Vandana ma'am, for the wonderful efforts. And I hope this such kind of interaction with academia and within between the academics and between the industry will be required. It's a need of the hour to bridge the gap which does exist, and we can have more of these interactions. It's weird.
Thank you so much, sir, for the time and your effort you have invested in today's session. Uh, Now it's our honor to present the certificate to sir for such a great session.
Okay, thank you. So that is.
Amrita ma'am, please share the certificate on the screen. It
Yes, ma'am.
was not
Yes, ma'am.
visible actually.
Ma'am, now it is visible.
Right now it is not.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Put it into full screen mode.
In slideshow.
Okay, thanks a lot for this honor. Like, it's really kind
Thank you, sir.
of yeah, it's
Thank you so
very.
much. I would
Thanks
like
so
to
much,
say
sir.
thanks
Thank
to
you
all the
so much.
participants. The attendance form has already been shared in chat and WhatsApp group as well as on email. You all are requested to submit the form. And with this, I conclude end of the today's session. Thanks to all. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
And all the participants appreciated your presentation. They are connected with WhatsApp group also. So it was indeed a great presentation, wonderful, very, very interesting and interactive presentation. So in future also we will like to have you some kind of interaction in physical mode as well. So this
Yeah,
time,
it'll be my pleasure. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Okay. Have a nice day.
Thank you.